Hi, my name is Steve Hunt. I'm the Chief Expert for Work and Technology for SAP, and I'm going to be sharing with you some thoughts from a paper that I wrote recently called The Skills Management Revolution: 1, 2, and 3-Year Predictions. I wrote this because there's a lot of innovation happening right now in the world of skills management solutions, skills ontologies, and kind of move to what they call skill-based organizations. So I wrote this in part just to make sense of it for myself. What do I think is going to happen? And then thought I would share this again, like any forecast. I don't know that these things are going to happen. I'm sure they're not going to happen exactly how I've laid it out, but I think it's probably directionally correct. And also talk a little bit about what may not happen. Now, I want to start by talking about skills in general. The idea of skills management is actually one of the oldest parts of talent management. This picture that I've got here is from the Chinese Empire in the 3rd century BC, where they did formal skills assessment for government administrators. So the concept of skills has been around a long time. But what I'm going to be talking about is a little bit about what is skills management, why is it getting so much attention, and then I'm going to go into the forecasts, there are 3-year forecasts, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think none of it might happen at all. Why this whole sort of skills management revolution might not happen. I personally hope that it will happen because I think it's a step in the right direction for maximizing the potential of the workforce. But at the same time, it's a very significant, not just technological and operational change for companies, it's actually a very significant cultural change if we were to fully embrace this idea of what's called skills-based management. And I'll talk more about that later on. So let me start out, though. I always like to start with clear definitions. The word skills is thrown around a lot. It has different definitions, but the way that I think it's most commonly defined is skills are what you know how to do, and competencies are how you actually use those skills. So skills are what you know, competencies or behaviors are how you do that. And in my previous book, Common Sense Talent Management, I talked a lot about the difference between sort of a skill and a competency and a goal. And I use this analogy to a bicycle. A goal is what you're trying to accomplish at your job. And that's where your motivation and attention. What are you trying to achieve? But how you achieve your goals is through application of a combination of what you know how to do, your skills, which is kind of the back wheel of the bicycle providing the power, as well as how you use those skills, your behavioral competencies, how you build relationships, how you work with others, how you plan and organize, which is more sort of navigating down the road. Now, in reality, the difference between a skill and a competency, they kind of tend to blur together. But the way I look at it is something that's a skill is something where you'd be very comfortable saying, I don't know how to do this. So, for example, if somebody asked me, do I know how to speak Japanese? I would say no. However, a competency is more something where it's not about knowing how or not how to do it. It's more about how effective are you doing that. If somebody asked, are you are you competent at building relationships? It's unlike anyone would ever say, no, I don't have any capability in building relationships. They might say I'm more or less effective at it, as compared to skills, which, if somebody asks, do you know how to program in Python? And you don't know how to do it, you're probably pretty comfortable saying, no, I don't know how to do it. So that's kind of how I talk about the difference of it is if you think of it in terms of I know it or I don't versus I'm more or less effective at it. But obviously, there's differences in proficiency level and skills, just as like there's difference in proficiency level and competencies. But the thing about skills is they are the hard barriers for a lot of jobs. I remember years ago talking to a plant manager, and we actually were talking about competencies, and he said, competencies are great, but I need somebody who knows how to fix this machine. And that kind of gets to this idea of skills. Now, why are skills, again, as I mentioned earlier, they've been around for a long, long time. They're not a new concept. Why suddenly, though, are we getting so much attention? Well, it's two things. One, it's being driven by business changes. Sort of the collision of digitalization. In my book, Talent Tectonics, I talk a lot about this. Two big shifts that are affecting work. One is digitalization of work is really changing the skills we need just to do work, and it's changing them very quickly. Meanwhile, there's demographic shifts such that there's more people aging out of a lot of our labor markets and entering into them. These two things are sort of colliding, and this conference board data kind of shows an indication of just how hard it's getting to fill certain jobs, and particularly the more skilled ones. If you look at healthcare or maintenance and repair, those tend to have very highly specialized skills. And we don't have a shortage of people per se. What we're running into is companies having a shortage of people that know how to do very specific things. At the same time, even for employees currently in their jobs, the skills required to do their jobs are changing often very, very quickly. This is data from Burning Glass. And what they did is they looked at job titles and job postings, And then they looked at the skill requirements underneath them. And what they found is that even her job postings were like the job title for data engineer, same job title now as it was 15 years ago, but the skills required to be a data engineer have almost completely changed. I kind of as it combines to the other side, mystery shoppers, that hasn't changed very much. If you're on the other side, but if you look at it, even if you are in the same job, the skills required to do your job are changing because the technology and the other aspects of work are changing themselves. So this is creating a real big demand on organizations to struggling to find the skilled talent they need to run their organization. And that's what skills management really is. It's making sure a company has the workforce possessing the technical skills to execute on that company's strategy. So this is becoming harder and harder to do. The other reason, though, why skills management has gotten so popular suddenly over the last couple of years is that the technology available for skills management has suddenly gotten much, much more powerful. Companies have been providing skills management solutions for a long time, but one of the big challenges of these solutions is historically they were manually created. They took a lot of time to build because there's literally thousands of skills that can influence an industry. And once you had them built, often they were out of date because the skills change. Plus, it was very hard to match people to skills because there's no like standardized language. So if you look on this figure, what it shows is the traditional way companies would sort of create skills libraries is using hierarchies. So you might have like, okay, we're a technical company and we've got programming skills and we've got mathematics skills. And then under mathematics, we have statistics and algebra. Under programming, we have SAS, which is a statistical analysis program, and Java. What this would miss, though, imagine an employee said, well, I have SAS skills, it says on a resume, but it doesn't say they have any statistics skills. And the company says, we need somebody with statistics skills. Well, they go, well, this person doesn't match because they said they have SAS skills, and that's a programming skill. What this hierarchy on the left doesn't understand is that if somebody knows how to use SAS, which is a statistical analysis programming language, they invariably have some level of statistical proficiency. Conversely, if somebody has statistical proficiency, it will be much easier for them to learn how to program in SAS. But the historical way, it wouldn't make that connection. What skills ontologies do, and the concept of skills ontologies has been around for a long time. I actually helped build them like 20 years ago. What they do, though, is they look beyond these hierarchical relationships and they look at associations. And what they do now, because there's so much data about skills and job descriptions, people's resumes, training courses, that they scan all that data such that they can say, based on pattern recognition, people that know how to use SAS also tend to be proficient in statistics, or people that are proficient in statistics seem to be able to go into jobs that require SAS. It starts to make these connections. And by making these connections automatically using data available on the web, it allows companies to have much richer insight into the skills their organization needs, but also the skills that people have, because it does these more sophisticated inferences. So these two things, the skill shortage combined with these new skills management solutions, is leading to a really explosion and a new sort of next evolution, I should say, of skills management solutions that really do three things. They do skills data collection where they scan a variety of different sources, both external data out on the web, internal data from organizations, whether on people or the market or the company. They take all of this data from job descriptions, resumes, training courses, government data sources. They then feed it into these ontology machine learning engines. And there's really three kinds of ontologies, either to build a skills ontology. What are the skills that exist in a different labor market? Or what are the skills and organization level that a company needs? Or what are the skills that individual people possess? And you can use ontologies to build these kind of three kinds of ontologies. And then that data is fed into applications for things like talent intelligence to understand labor forces, workforce planning, recruiting, staffing, internal employee talent movement, training, development, compensation. So this is the sort of the modern landscape of skills management solutions. And there's an absolute explosion of these going on right now. Like in SAP's own partner network, I can think of like at least 12. And many of these didn't even exist 3 years ago. So there's been this explosion of these new tools. So my 2025, getting to the forecast, my 2025 forecast is that companies are going to adopt skills ontology solutions really around specific needs, and they should. One of the recommendations I would make to pretty much any organization that's got more than maybe a couple thousand employees, if you only have like 20 employees, just talk to people. You don't need a sophisticated solution to understand their skills. But once you get past like even 1,000 employees, it gets really hard to keep track of what skills the company needs and what skills people have. And so then and there's all these different ontologies of different levels of sophistication, price points, applications. But I think what needs to happen over the next year is companies should really look to identify an area where lack of skills is having a big impact on the organization, whether that's hiring, internal training, compensation, learning, succession, and then go out and look in the market for a skills ontology that's designed to address that need, because they're not all built the same. The ontologies that you find in these solutions, for example, a company that's building a recruiting solution for skills is going to focus on have an ontology for an organization, understanding the skills the organization needs, and a ontology for employees and individuals in the organization. It might not have a lot of data about the general labor market overall. You're going to have a mixture. So different skill solutions have different skills ontologies. And that's really important. And they also have to be trained differently. So what I'd say now is in 2025, the real focus for companies is go out there and start exploring them, not just because they will make certain things better, they will help you with specific problems, but also they'll help you start building the capabilities internally in your organization to understand this new form of technology, which is likely to become more and more pervasive. So it's sort of building a capability. Just like companies are building capabilities in generative AI, we need to build capabilities internally with our HR and HR technology departments on the use of skills ontologies, because they're going to become more important going forward. Which brings me to my 2026 forecast. As companies start implementing more and more skills ontologies, there's going to be a need for some sort of centralized system of record ontology, because and where this comes from, I don't know. I have different thoughts. I think it may come a lot from core HR systems, because a lot of core HR systems have skills management ontologies in them. That's kind of what my preference would be. I think that's what makes the most sense. But it could come from other areas too. But companies are going to say, look, we need sort of one ontology to rule them all, if I can paraphrase Lord of the Rings, that will allow you to import and export data between different specialized skills ontologies, as well as manage a lot of the governance issues that go into this. And so the forecast here, the recommends I have for 2024 is start thinking, one, about what you would want a system of record ontology to do. One of the big things is security, and confidentiality. A lot of the data in these ontologies is very personal about employees, or it may be about company strategies. And you may want to have a lot of control, including there could be legal requirements about how that data is managed, how long you can hang on to it for. So thinking about governance of all this skills data and how it's being effectively transferred back and forth between different applications. The other one is in our soon is corporate skills independence. I've talked to a few companies that said, look, when we have all this skills data of our workforce, we don't want it all living in a third party vendor application. We may not have access to it. But third party vendors that build ontologies are not going to provide you with their entire ontology. That's a lot of intellectual property. So finding a way that says if we provide information to a vendor to build an ontology to support an application, we still want information to come back in a way that gives us a better understanding of the skills that our organization has or that our employees have. And so looking to manage that. There's also, you're going to need these, you're going to start looking for solutions that can support import and export, integrate with other systems, including solutions you may have in your company like compensation, payroll, scheduling, that may not use skills ontologies, but you want to feed that data into. So looking at these is going to be really critical. And I'd say, why I don't think companies will necessarily need them in the short term, they will absolutely need these in the long term as skills data becomes more prevalent. And now's the time to start thinking about it. I have not actually seen a vendor refer to a skills ontology as a system of record skills ontology, but I believe we're going to start seeing that happen. The getting into the 2027 forecast, looking out farther on, this is where we get into this idea of skills-based organizations. A lot of the revolution part of skills management is about this idea of moving to skills-based management or skills-based organization. Well, what is a skills-based organization? Well, to answer this question, we have to first say, well, what are we moving from? Well, traditionally, companies have been very role-based. They've been collections of people in different jobs performing different functions. And there's kind of a one-to-one mapping that, people are kind of cogs in the machine, if you will. And if we knew a person's job, we kind of assumed we knew what skills they had. Now, in reality, we know that's not true. employees in the same job can have very different skills. But in general, we would say, okay, if you're in this job, you probably have these skills. And if you're in this job, you perform these kind of tasks and you get paid this amount of money and it's funded out of this cost center of the organization. And it's sort of very, very clearly structured. What a skills-based organization does is it actually functions the way small companies function, where we don't think of people based on their job title. We think of them based on their individual capabilities and skills, recognizing that just because two people are in the same job does not mean they have the same skills and capabilities. Similarly, we don't think of what the organization does in forms of different job tasks. We think of it in terms of just this long list of tasks. So, like if you think of it as a small company, in a company with fewer than like 15 people, what people do isn't heavily defined by their formal job role. I always remember when I was in a smaller company where the president of the company, yelled out the door once and said, "I need somebody to help me fix this printer." Because he's like, "I don't know how to do this." And so, like, the head of our sales went in and fixed the printer. Not because that was the job of head of sales. It wasn't. It was because he had the skills to fix it. It was something that needed to be done. So he jumped in and just did it. This sort of flexible use where what people do is not based on the job role they have. It's based on what the company needs to get done, the tasks, and it's based on their capabilities to either do it or their desire to learn how to do it. Now, this creates a much more flexible organization, but it also creates a much more complicated organization. And not just on the assigning people to different roles and tasks, it also on how you allocate money. Because if somebody is spending time on one area, then moves to work on another area, that might be related to another cost center of the organization, but their headcount budget does it follow them? What goes on? And a lot of managers would be reluctant to embrace it because they're saying, look, I've got a team of people that are trying to, perform some task. And if one of them is going to go spend 50% of their time on something else that's important to the company, but frankly is not part of my team's charter, that's going to hurt my team. And so you get into a lot more complicated things around how you manage cost centers and workforce budgets, which is why I see as the prediction in 3 years as we start to go more towards skills-based organizations, because skills-based organizations are a much more effective utilization of talent because it allows people to tailor jobs based on their capabilities, individual potential, but they're far more complicated to run. And so in 2024, what I would say you start looking at to plan for this is one, think about the actions that were required to adapt to a more skills-based management approach, like using much more dynamic teams, having people move around a lot. But how can you do that without losing the productivity that comes from sort of consistent teams? So looking at how you would manage people moving around the organization more, how you might deal with the fact of splitting employees across different cost centers. So, the work they're doing is not necessarily associated with the cost center they may formally report up to. How would you manage that? And also the implications of compensation. That people are often paid to use the skills they have, but if they move into roles to acquire new skills, they're not necessarily adding maximum value to the company. Or if they build new skills, their market value might suddenly go way up externally. How are you going to change their compensation to be more competitive with skills? These are very sophisticated things. I think what we're going to see is we're going to see core HR systems, really the future of moving to skills-based organizations, is not about better skills management solutions. I think the skills management solutions we have now, but it can always be better, are good enough to support a move to skills-based organizations, thanks to the development of ontologies. What is not good enough is all the stuff we use to manage the workforce costs, workforce operations, so that we can have people moving around more dynamically. There's another big challenge too, and it's culturally. Employees don't necessarily want to have all this uncertainty that goes into a skills-based organization. And there's big individual differences in people in their comfort having their jobs constantly change. So yeah, we had you work on that, but now you work on this. Now you got to work on this other thing. And they're moving all over. Some people will be like, this is fantastic. Other people, I think even not just the person, but where they are in their career, what's going on in their life. There's times where we're like, yeah, I want to do lots of new things. And there's sometimes you're like, I just want to show up at work, do a good job and go home. Maybe I've got like 5 kids I need to take care of. There's other things in my life going on, right? So it's like, how do we manage the cultural aspect of it? So I think on that, really starting to have this conversation in your company about culturally, what's the appetite for moving to this? If we really want to move to it, what do we need to change about the culture? This includes really treating managers differently too, because historically every company says they want their managers to share talent, but very few companies actually reward managers for promoting high potential people off their team or sharing their talent. So looking at how do we support managers as well, and encouraging also very non-linear career paths, so that if somebody, moves out of their core functional area to try something different, it doesn't derail their ability to advance their career. So a lot of sort of cultural things. So what I've shared here is my take on sort of where I think skills management is going to go over the next 3 years, and things that you can do as a company right now to prepare for it. I do feel, though, that I've got to also admit none of this may happen. I mean, yes, for sure, skills solutions are going to get us to the next year. We're going to have better ways to recruit people and better ways to assign learning and a lot of sort of specific applications. But will it actually move to this massive transformation of skills-based organizations? It could. As I pointed out, we have some very significant operational and cultural issues that we would have to address. And also, in terms of coordinating skills ontologies, sharing data, the other one of the really big ones too is the more that we use skills data, the more employees are going to be wondering, is this data actually accurate? If you're going to make a decision about me or about how the company's structured that's going to affect me based on data that comes out of a skills ontology, just because you can create a skills profile doesn't mean that profile is accurate. It's sort of like just because somebody has a resume doesn't mean their resume tells you their full capabilities or is accurate. And this is one of the really big challenges I think ahead of us, especially for the skills management vendors, is what can we do to more effectively validate the accuracy and proficiency levels of people's skills based on what comes out of these ontologies. Because at some point, if employees and leaders don't trust the data is accurate, they're really going to resist using it to make these sort of high stakes decisions around how the organization is designed and staffed. And then, of course, there's the operational and cultural challenges. So I am an optimist. I think these are things that can be overcome, but it is going to take work and focus. It's not like, we've got this new technology that's going to magically change the world to skills based any more than the Segway completely changed the nature of cities, which if you went back and look at the history when they launched the Segway, that was the big thing. It was going to completely change the design of urban structures. Well, it didn't. Skills ontologies, could they completely change the design of organizations? They could facilitate it. But whether they do, I think has a lot more to do with building the technology that companies use to run their workforce and manage their workforce. That is the core HR technology that gets into managing workforce costs. I think that's the big change that we have to become skills based, fully skills based. So, in some sort of a closing thought from my book Talent Tectonics, it talks a lot about skills. The last sort of thought about skill shortages, skill shortages overall, which is what's driving a lot of this, can be viewed as a threat or an opportunity. The threat, and it really is a threat, it's not just a threat for companies, it's a threat for our whole society. As the world demands more specialized skills, we have to get better at enabling employees to develop new skills and to move into new skilled jobs, or else we're going to run into a very fragmented society of highly skilled, totally overworked people and people lacking skills that are sort of stuck in an endless thing of lower level jobs. So we have to get better at it. But if we really lean into using technology, focusing on making education more accessible so that people can build new skills, it creates a great opportunity to create financially rewarding jobs that encourage continuous growth and self-development. And these are the kind of jobs that create happy and prosperous societies. So skills management, it's not just about business operations. It's about really having a healthy, sustainable workforce and society overall. So this is definitely a topic worth digging into more and focusing a lot more investment in. So with that, I hope that you've enjoyed this. If you want to read the actual paper, you can find it on my LinkedIn site. And I hope to get feedback. I would love to hear people's thoughts on what I've shared here. Thank you.